After career mentoring for over a decade, I've noticed that most people have one thing in common, and that's that they're stuck in this false belief that they only have two options for their career. Either they go the corporate route, where they have the potential to earn more money, but probably won't care too much about the job they're doing, or they go the passion and purpose route, where they do something creative or caring or community focused, but might take a hit to their income or stability or career capital. And if you clicked on this video, I'm guessing neither of those options feels quite right to you. And if you keep going down the path that you are now, you might wake up in a few decades' time and think, what have I been spending my precious time in this life doing? But that doesn't mean that in this video I'm going to tell you to throw it all in and follow your passions. What I am going to do in this video is take you through why finding purpose in your job is good for you and for the future of the world, why your choice is not limited to this binary of these two polar options, and where you can find this whole space in between those two options, where you can work the professional career that you've built for yourself, but with more meaning and fulfillment than you're lacking right now. Right now, if you're feeling stuck and unmotivated and wanting more, you are absolutely not alone. This quarter and midlife crisis that I'm seeing all around me is backed up by research that was done a few years ago that found that over 70% of workers thought that purpose was the main thing affecting their well-being at work, but less than half of them thought their job had any purpose. And that feeling doesn't just stay at work. Over 90% of people felt that their happiness levels at work affected how they felt at home as well. So you might think to yourself, well, I'll just put up with it. Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, I'll find the enjoyment in the 5 to 9, or at weekends I'll make up for it. But it's probably impacting your life more than you're giving it credit for. I have a theory that this might all be linked to this huge rise in people kind of rebelling having a career altogether. I don't know about you, but I've been seeing a real resurgence in that trend from 4 years ago, the I don't dream of Labour one, where people are rejecting the idea of having a career altogether. Maybe it's just my algorithm, but I'm seeing a really strong narrative of step away from the system and don't tie your identity to your work, and more power to you if that's what you want to do. I think that's really great. I just don't think it works for everybody. For most of us, it's not that simple, because whether we like it or not, the world that we live in means we do need to earn money. And earning that money often takes up a huge amount of our time, particularly if you're early and mid-career. I'm sure by now we're all saturated with hearing about this book, 4,000 Weeks. Confession, I actually haven't read this book, but it's really been having its moment, so I've heard about it everywhere. And the premise, let me just read it out, is that the average human lifespan is only about 4,000 weeks, so the book urges readers to embrace limitations, prioritize what matters, and find meaning in the present. So when you put these two things together, first, the idea that you have very limited precious time in this life, and a big chunk of that might have to be spent working. And the second, that you've spent years of developing skills and experience that you don't just want to abandon, and maybe you've got commitments or built a lifestyle that depend on the income that you've got. You don't want to just throw in the towel and pivot your life completely. It's no wonder that so many people feel stuck between a rock and a hard place, because this is a really tough binary to confront. So we need to find some middle ground, somewhere between these two ends of the spectrum. At one side, you've got carrying on as you are now, feeling like your job is a bit pointless and you're growing apathy and resentment towards the grind, all the way up to completely ditching your career and throwing in the towel, potentially living off grid, which again, great if that's what you want to do, but that's not for everyone. So the question really is in this in between. How do you make your work time count so that you're still kind of part of this system, but you're not spending decades doing something that feels really unfulfilling and pointless? There's actually a whole organization built around exactly this question. It's called 80,000 Hours. And their core concept is that you'll spend about 80,000 hours of your life working. So it's not a small insignificant detail. It's a major part of your life. So it's worth taking the time to figure out what is going to be the best way to spend those 80,000 hours. But how do you know what that is when, as we've already said, both of those paths that we've been talking about have their own trade-offs? With the corporate route, you can earn well, you can climb the ladder. On paper, it might work. But like we said, a lot of people, it can feel repetitive or detached and like you're just kind of getting through your week. I saw this happen to a lot of my friends when they were a handful of years in. They just kind of felt like something was missing. Not in like a big dramatic way, just in a kind of quiet, is this it? And then now there's a new layer of uncertainty with AI and automation and industries shifting, and that path that used to feel stable doesn't feel quite as guaranteed anymore. On the other side, you've got the purpose-driven work, the social and community path, like working for charities or frontline healthcare or teaching, or even the self-fulfillment path of creative pursuits. Work that clearly matters and makes a difference or follows passions and interests. But that one has its own trade-offs. You might have lower pay or limited progression, lack of stability, unsociable hours. Plenty of people do feel really fulfilled with either one of these options, by the way. If that's you, that's great. This video isn't for you. But for a lot of people, the grass looks greener on the other side, but a complete pivot just isn't really realistic. Or the trade-offs on the other side don't sound that appealing. Particularly from the corporate side, if you're already mid-career and you've spent years developing your skills and maybe your lifestyle depends on your income. You can call it sunken cost fallacy or lifestyle inflation or whatever you want, but for a lot of people it's a very valid reason to not just suddenly want to have a massive overhaul of their career. But there is an answer to when you're stuck in this middle ground between these two paths, and most people seem to be completely unaware that it exists. Advice telling you to pick one side or another is completely missing this third option. The answer is in this quiet shift that's been happening over the last few years in the type of social impact work that's being done around the world. We've started to realise that solving big global problems is going to need more than putting a plaster on a bullet wound. So traditionally, charities have been much more hands-on and operational. A lot of the organisations that were set up to help people or animals or the environment work by directly responding to resolving problems as they come up with the resources available. And that work is still incredibly important. Please don't think I'm saying otherwise. But what's changed is this big focus that we're now putting on big picture problems and how to prevent them. Instead of reacting once a problem emerges, there's now a much bigger focus on stepping back and asking, how can we predict what the biggest issues in the world are going to be? How can we prevent them from happening or understand why they're happening in the first place? And that's led to a growth in this bigger picture, more strategic work, influencing policy, improving systems, thinking about long-term impact. And since we're doing more systems change work, the skills we need in that sector are changing too. Having a social impact job is no longer only about helping on the ground. It's about people who can plan, engage, organise, communicate at a global scale, which is exactly why people with professional backgrounds are becoming such a key part of this space, because all of those skills and roles are already found in the corporate world. But in this case, they would be applied to solving these big, complex, global issues that would be helping the world. So you lose that element of these roles feeling like pointless jobs that don't help anyone, which research shows a lot of people do feel their jobs are. Now, I don't want to make it sound like this is a brand new idea. There are organisations, businesses, government departments, charities who have obviously been doing this kind of work for a long time. But this kind of systems approach is gaining more and more traction as the years go on, with more businesses focusing on like social enterprise and more charities becoming more business-like in how they operate, focusing on advocacy and prevention. There's also more research institutes and policy think tanks that are partnering with businesses and governments to be key influencers. So what's changed that a lot of people don't seem to know about yet is that meaningful work, I'm going to use that as a catch-all term, has become a lot more corporatized in nature. It's strategic and organized and professionalized, which means there's now this distinct sector somewhere in the middle ground between the corporate life and the purpose-driven alternative, where you can use your professional and corporate skills to work on meaningful problems that add this feeling of purpose. And they usually still pay you enough to keep the life you've built, because while organisations in these spaces are growing and hiring, they're competing for talent, right? So they need to offer competitive salaries, because if you want people with strong experience in things like data and operations, communications, strategy, you can't expect them to take a huge pay cut. So if you're trying to decide between sticking to the corporate grind or throwing the towel in to follow your passion or your purpose instead, a better question might be, where can I use the skills I have now to do more good? Because the role itself might not need to change as much as you think. You don't need to throw away what you've built and start all over again. It's more about applying your skills where they will have more impact, to combine what you're good at, what the world actually needs, and what kind of employment can support your life. And that's exactly what this series is about. In the coming videos, I'll break down where this kind of work can be found and what are the key industries that are going to keep growing over the next decades. Because once you understand that, you can start to position yourself in the right place at the right time. See you there.